The record last year was 3-10 because we only have 5 players, and the record this year is 7-9.
We was gonna make a team at Lynn McKinley if we had a coach or if we didn't, and we're having people come to our games to come watch us play.
Share the ball a little bit more now, and I actually see the team as like a sisterhood.
To go into an actual program that does have those type of losses, you feel like there's no expectation. And I've seen from previous games that I had looked at that they actually were talented.
Araciana, she loves to get buckets. Shy, she's strong with the ball. She'll body anybody. Faith, she brings the energy if we feeling down.
Denny is doing real good. I love Denny. I got to play with my sister this year. She's a freshman.
Marion Franklin, Christiana Towns, she had 35 points, 25 rebounds, and 10 steals. She averages 18.5 points per game, 9 rebounds, 6 steals per game. Her Mifflin game that we had, Tamaya Harrington, she had 27 points, 5 rebounds, 13 steals.
It makes me feel more confident. Start varsity as a freshman and play the whole game and make a lot of points with my teammates and a lot of assists.
Changing the culture means a lot to me. It makes me feel real good that people aren't just seeing Linden girls as trash. We here Monday through Saturday, so we really putting in the work, and I'm happy people are actually coming out and seeing us. We aren't just a team that's 3-10. We're an actual high school basketball team.
Once I actually did see Darthard and the program that he was actually running and how he was uplifting and actually caring, once they actually started to win games and to see their progress and to understand how much I did really care about them outside of just the game itself, it made them want to show up. It made them care. It made them want to actually work together and have a sisterhood to where they loved each other.
My brothers are Philip, LB, Chris, and Emmanuel. When I watch my brothers play, I look up to them and I play against them a lot. So it makes me a little tougher to play against girls.
The town's name is very strong in the community, and she's living up to her name.
My goal for Lynn McKinley is to win more games and set an example for little kids.
Being a senior is pretty bittersweet that the program is just getting together, and I'm about to leave, but I'm happy it got together. Coach means a lot to me. She is actually my NOAC advisor, so I be in her office a lot.
Miss Crenshaw, she makes sure I make it to individual workouts, things I need help with to be better.
She set up some team bonding for us. We do a lot of stuff on and off the court. I do enjoy playing against East since they are our rivals.
I have fun playing against Kennedy from Centennial, Kayla from Centennial, Layla from International.
For college, I would like to study stenography. College coaches should recruit me because I feel like I'm a good leader, I'm a good listener, and I have good discipline, and I can push myself.
She's always going to put 110% into whatever it is that she does. So a lot of the times whenever coaches are looking for that one player, that spark, Tamaya Harrington would be that person. I cannot wait to see the young woman that she's going to become.
I just want to do photography and still do basketball. College coaches should recruit me because I put all the work in. I'm very humble. I could make buckets, and I like to share the ball and communicate.
College coaches should recruit Christiana Towns because of her work ethic, the ability that she has, which is natural, and on top of that, she's very coachable. It's something different whenever you have someone to step on the court that has an athletic ability, that has a game that is different than a lot of players that do play the game, and you can still teach them something.
My name is William Stinchcomb, and I've been with the Columbus City Schools for 23 years.
My name is Mr. Dorsey Birdsall, and I'm a safety and security specialist.
My name is Anita Roman, and I am a Columbus City Schools bus driver.
My name is Samuel Gonzalez. I'm a food service manager currently at Briggs High School.
I know that if I'm not there every day and on time, you know, that student may not have a ride to school. And that weighs on me heavily. And I take pride in knowing that my students can set their clock on me. I'm always it takes a lot for me not to come to work. It's important to come to work every day, be on time, because we may be the only way that student gets to school.
Seeing the kids years later and having them come up to me and say how thankful and grateful they were and happy that, I kept them safe in the district and, that I can't retire or leave the district until, their kids graduate.
This was one of the best decisions I've made in my life. I didn't expect to live for this, but I love being part of the Columbus City School as a family. I just think because the building represents our districts, for me to see how clean the building is, I can take pride in my effort, and to put the cleaning and the organizing of the building, it just makes me feel a level of pride.
Peaceful mind can accomplish a lot of things. And when a student is hungry, their mind is oftentimes on what the next meal is going to be. In an indirect way, we affect the students in the kitchen. They can accomplish what they have to in the classroom. And for them to accomplish that, oftentimes that's going to better their situation for themselves, their family, and their community. So in a sense, helping the student in an indirect manner with the food is something that I really enjoy.
Columbus, Ohio has so much to offer our youth. The growth you can obtain from being a part of this district is huge. There is such diversity and learning experience happening throughout our K-12 buildings.
I love to see the excitement in the kids' faces when they know they can start school the very next day. So it's exciting for the families. So I think it's very impactful because it gives them that first start to, learning and growing.
I've been working with kids all my life. Coming here, meeting the students, the relationships that I've built over the years is just phenomenal. I'm seeing students, still see students to this day that thank me. Just, thanks for everything you've done. Thanks for helping provide a safe learning environment. Thank you for the talks, and they're really appreciative.
The district provides training throughout the school year and a lot of information that's constantly updated, and it's always available to us. So that's very helpful in being able to, provide the best service to, our students and parents. The diversity in Columbus and inclusion, it's unlike any other place, really. There's so many different cultures and you come in contact with just on a daily basis, with our students and parents and teachers.
I've really enjoyed the last few years working here at CCS. It's got great benefits, the people have been great, and I wouldn't change it for anything. I've had other job offers, but I've turned them down because I just really like the people and I like working here.
Run to your computer and apply online. This is one of the greatest kept secrets in the school district, really. This is a great job. Just apply online, it's easy. We have, our training is excellent, and we'll do everything we can to help you get through, and you won't regret it, I promise.
I used to get calls all the time from people asking me about the station. What kind of music do you play? And the canned format was adult album alternative. And so I asked the music director, what does that actually mean? And he said, we play the good stuff. That was the end of his explanation.
Well, AAA music is heavy on the singer-songwriters and the Americana, but we also include blues music, jazz, other styles like world music.
It's not the same songs every other hour. And in 90.5's case, it's not even the same songs each week.
WCB is pretty unique with all the variety of music that we can play and the variety of shows that we have.
We've had John Prine, Ziggy Marley, Warren Haynes from the Allman Brothers. We have had Tedeschi Trucks. The list goes on and on.
The thing that we have at WCBE is experts in music that know where the good stuff is.
Homemade, locally produced programming is what we're all about, and just sort of sitting there and grooving out in a radio station, knowing that I'm doing the same thing with thousands of listeners across the state. I really dig that. I dig that sort of concept.
We're all over the map. It's great music. People that go, oh, I listen to everything. If you listen to everything, all you need to do is listen to us.
Tommy Emmanuel, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Maggie.
And Accomplice 2 is out now. You didn't think you could top the other Accomplice album, but it's pretty special as well. But we're thrilled to have you here today, and we've got a lot to talk about, where it all started, this latest album, the show tonight with Jorma Kaukonen.
Yeah, indeed.
Who we adore as well.
Yeah.
The show's tonight at 8, and we'll have a pair of tickets to give away for the event tonight. Details at kappa.com. It's also listed on our Facebook events. Tommy, what are you going to start us off with?
I thought I might play one of the tracks from the new album, and this is a song that I wrote as a dedication to Merle Travis's son, Tom Bresh, who passed away last year. He was quite a cannonball, that guy. He was a comet flying through our lives, like Travis was, I guess. So I tried to write this tune, and it kind of with a typical Merle Travis flavor. But then when I got to the bridge, it visits Stevie Wonder or someone like that, you know. And that's because I'm from a different generation to Merle Travis. But on the album, my buddy Richard Smith plays all the harmony parts. So today I'll have to do his part as well. So here it is, Son of a Gun.
How do you do it?
It's all smoke and mirrors.
Tommy Emmanuel joining us live from Studio A, and it's a track on the latest album, Accomplice 2, Son of a Gun, with Richard Smith. And tonight's the show, 8 o'clock, with Jorma Kaukonen, 2 separate sets, and they might get together.
We do.
For talk or during
I haven't seen Jorma in a little while, so it'll be nice to catch up with him, and you know, he's been a great friend to me.
When did you first play together?
When I came.
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, there we are.
No, I can't.
Okay. Well, good evening and welcome to the Community Engagement and Advocacy Committee. Please call the roll.
Ms. Barnes?
Here.
Mr. Cole?
Excused.
Mr. Jenkins?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy?
Present.
Ms. Musa? She's available via Zoom. Ms. Reyes? Ms. Stillwagon? Ms. Vera?
Here. All right. Well, thank you. Good evening and welcome. Chair Cole couldn't be here with us tonight as he is traveling back from a conference, which we're really excited to learn more as to what he learned over that time period. Unfortunately, tonight we do not have quorum, so we will not be able to vote on our minutes from the last meeting. So today's agenda will be an approval, or we will not be approving the minutes, but we will be able to have in-depth conversation around the superintendent's community task force review, and then we will also hear a brief introduction to the legislative platform overview. So is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. Vero?
Yes.
Approved.
All right. All right. Well, welcome, colleagues. We are really excited to be able to have this conversation and the start of a conversation. The Community Engagement and Advocacy Committee will be contributing to the next steps for engaging with students, families, and community regarding the final recommendations that the task force provided to the board back in June. I believe it was June, right? So it feels far away, but it really isn't that far away. And so tonight, members, we will have an opportunity to learn more about the engagement strategy that was used during that time period. And then we will be able to have open discussion around your suggestions as the board is in the process of evaluating a strategy to be able to go back into our community to talk about the final recommendations and to evaluate those final recommendations. And so tonight we are really excited to be able to have Dr. Catherine Moser with us and Lee Cole, who was a huge part in this process and wanted to be able to provide just some additional context as to what the engagement strategy was like before, our successes in that work, and then after that we can dive into some of the suggested topics to discuss. So with that being said, good evening, ladies.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Catherine Moser. I serve as the Deputy Superintendent of Academics in Columbus City Schools, and I had the opportunity over several months between February and June to support on the staff side of the facility task force. And so you do have a copy of those final recommendations, the final presentation that went to the board in June. You have a hard paper copy in front of you, and this information is also available on board docs for anyone who might be following along. So I won't walk all the way through the presentation, but just provide a few highlights that I think are really key and pertinent to your future conversation about engagement. So just to level set for all of us, the Superintendent's Community Facility Task Force began work in February and wrapped up that work in the middle of June. So about 5 months of work. And all of the recap of each meeting that the committee held is available on the website. If someone goes on and just searches facility task force, they can see a recap and actually look at the data that the task force considered in each of those meetings. For a little background before moving forward, the discussion around the possibility of school consolidation and the impact that the very large number of small schools in Columbus City Schools is having on our overall, the resources that are available at our schools is something that the board and superintendent actually talked about as we were pursuing our levy last fall. And it was part of the statement of facts that, and some of the graphs are in your packet that I know you had a chance to look at. And that is that impact that the number of very small schools has in terms of the result is that we spread our resources that we do have across a large number of schools. And so in the statement of facts, the we named at that time that it was going to be necessary for our community to consider the portfolio of schools in the footprint. And so within your packet, you'll see some specific data around when I talk about small schools, what that means. We also named back in the fall that our ESSER, our pandemic funding, was coming to an end. Those dollars are only available to the district through the end of September. And so we knew that a number of strategies that we were supporting with ESSER funding, we were going to need to make decisions about those. Back in the fall, we worked with a partner at Educational Resource Strategy, and the data is in this presentation that also names that the district spends more on our operational costs than on academics, driven in large part by our costs related to transportation, as well as the age of many of our buildings. And so together with the sunset of ESSER, approval of our levy, and this discussion that had been named that it was time for our community to have a conversation again around the, our footprint of schools and portfolio, the facility task force began to meet and work. We also took time with the task force not only to dig into the financial impact of small schools, but also the academic impact and the limited offerings, especially at the secondary level, when students are attending an under-enrolled school. So the offerings that the school can provide when you just don't have a large number of teachers, because of course staffing is driven, enrollment drives staffing. If you have a small number of students, your teaching staff gets reduced. And so we're finding that in many of our schools, the academic offerings are limited. And they're very different from school to school. So if your student is attending a school with 800 students, the offerings there are very different than a school with 400 students. It also impacts extracurriculars, including athletics, and the way the Ohio High School Athletic Association looks at competition is in large part driven by the size of the school. And so together with other offerings, you don't have as many students to participate in band, you may not have other extracurricular activities, again, driven by issues around enrollment. So we looked at the financial and academic impact, as well as previous recommendations that asked the board to consider standardization of grade levels. So we have some elementary schools where sixth grade is part of the elementary school. And we have other sixth graders who are attending a more traditional 6, 7, 8 school. And so that provides for inconsistent academic offerings for our students. In addition to that, we did have a period of time where we had funds that were available, and we had a number of schools in the Columbus City schools that were either renovated or rebuilt. And so again, an inconsistent experience for students, some attending schools that have had little to no facility touch in over 50 years, and others who are attending a relatively newer school. Our Columbus Afrocentric Early College campus being the newest school that we have. And so the task force certainly considered a number of different data sources, and ultimately came out with an initial set of recommendations. And here's the good, now we're getting to the good part that this committee will be especially interested in, and that is that over it was a relatively short time, we'll talk about that more in a minute, but between the beginning of May and the middle of June, we held a series of community forums, community engagement opportunities. Some of them were face-to-face, in person, some of a coffee shop, some were in school locations, and some were actually virtual Zoom sessions. And so those provided opportunities for two-way engagement and for the task force to hear from community members about that initial set of recommendations. As I said, we kicked off with a town hall that was telecast and provided some introductory information, building the why, and some initial context around recommendations. And then some of you came out to some of those face-to-face meetings. The ones that were, I would say, best attended, where we had the larger turnout, were in the locations where we were in a school that maybe was being considered, that was part of the initial recommendation, or situated within a community that was going to be impacted based on the initial set of recommendations. We did have a couple of Zoom community meetings, and what was different about those was that we took time at the beginning of each of those Zoom sessions to really provide context around the recommendations. And the feedback there was that that education session at the beginning helped participants feel more informed and actually brought in quite a bit of feedback. The feedback was collected through a couple of different venues. One was in the face-to-face and the live sessions. People could fill out comment cards if they wanted to do that, and we did receive written responses. Most of the feedback actually went through QR codes. And so if you came out to those sessions, or as you glance through your packet, there's some photos of what those live sessions looked like. There were a series of maps displayed around the space. Each map had a QR code, and a participant could take out their phone or an iPad digital device, snap a picture of that QR code, and it actually took the participants into a survey. And as you see within your packet, there were over 1,700 responses through those QR code surveys. You see this in your packet, but 900 attendees came out during that 5-week period, and about 430 community members signed in at one of those events, for a total of 4,000 responses to the survey. The task force then actually spent a couple of weeks reviewing the survey responses, that community feedback, the comment cards that had been collected, and had a meeting where they discussed that feedback. In addition to that, during a couple of board meetings leading up to the final presentation in June, there were speakers who came out to share at the board meeting perspective on various scenarios. And then in June, the task force, members of the task force presented to the Board of Education a final set of recommendations, and you see those scenarios at the end of your packet. So again, the total process began in February and ended in about the middle of June with that final set of recommendations that were made to the board. At that time, and President Vera, I'll turn my comment to you as far as what occurred then in the middle of June.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Moser. So that evening, my colleagues and I decided to take some more time to have conversation and community engagement around the final recommendation list of the 9 schools. So it was in that meeting, in that session, we decided to receive the recommendations, but wanted to be able to spend some more time thinking about how do we really dive deeper into these recommendations, ensuring that our community has had time to, weigh in on those 9 buildings. As a district and as a board, we have had more time to ask questions and to really think about the strategy around what happens, in these buildings, in these communities. So recognizing that we really appreciated the work of the task force, but there were some additional layers that were not a part of their charge that we as a board wanted to take the time and say, listen, we really want to pull this back and we want to have some deeper dives and some additional conversations. And so, that's what we decided to do at that particular meeting. And then we went into recess for the month of July, and then we came back in August. And it was at the top of this last 2 board meetings ago where I actually worked with each chair of each committee to assign different tasks as it relates to the final recommendations. And so each committee is contributing in different ways to this work, and being able tonight to come before you to start gathering your perspective, your insight is a big part of what we envision this process to look like.
So my last comment here on the process is that there were some changes in recommendations from initial recommendations to that final set of recommendations that came in June. There were some schools where in the initial recommendation, maybe it appeared from strictly an enrollment and usage scenario that perhaps the school boundary could change and 2 schools could come together. And after doing additional analysis, considering the way that those buildings were actually being used, the task force actually removed some of the initial buildings from that set of recommendations. The task force also considered the time that it may take for the district to make changes, especially if school boundaries, for example, were shifting. And then a sensitivity, especially around high schools, and the amount of time that it may take to, if the board decided to move forward with a change at the high school level, sort of how to bring the schools together in a way that would best support the students in the community that would be impacted. So that was that overview of the process. You do have, again, the full presentation, the details in your packet. course, that meeting was recorded. So I think my understanding is we really want to talk, so I just gave what happened, and now we really want to focus on how we move forward in garnering additional input from this committee.
Thank you, Dr. Moser. Ms. Lee, or Ms. Cole, before we move on to that piece, is there anything from the engagement perspective, is there anything you would like to add or just anything else you would like to highlight in this process?
We gave a robust opportunity for the community to be involved in the conversation, and we're just looking to expand more and get more community involvement from not only our parents, but the community at large, into having the opportunity to help shape the future of the Columbus City Schools. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. And so, colleagues, as has been presented tonight, this information I know was sent to you electronically probably about a week ago or a few nights ago, also a hard copy. And certainly, for us as a committee, it's important that we can start to talk about just some of the ideas around this engagement process. My colleagues and I are certainly interested in an authentic process. And so wanting to be able to hear from you and your perspective as we are in the process of creating a strategy to be able to really effectively, going from a list of 20 schools to a list of 9 schools. I mean, if you look at what the initial recommendation was to ultimately what was presented to us back in June, there was also some additional recommendations as Dr. Moser had indicated in terms of grade band standardization, and there's a few other elements that were also brought out that evening. And so, wanting to hear from you in terms of, we've provided just some of the overarching things that my colleagues and I have been kind of thinking through around stakeholder identification, our communication channels, our message clarity, our engagement tactics, measuring effectiveness. And so this is about moving the work forward. I recognize there's area of opportunity for improvement. There's some areas that I think that we all learn from, and certainly want to be able to hear from you as a starting point as we are collectively working on this together. And so, I will just open it up before we dive into the questions at hand. If any member has any questions for either one of my colleagues in regards to the process before.
It's a lot of work.
Yes, it is a lot of work. I would agree. I don't know. That's a good question. We have a question in the audience, but I don't know what that process.
Walk up to the mic.
If you want to come to the mic, yeah.
Say your name. Is the mic on? Is the mic on?
It sounds like it is, yeah. Okay, yeah, we can hear you.
Catherine Moser, yes.
Yes, as far as you said now, the total community engagement was 4,000, correct? You said based off the QR codes and other things, you had about 4,000 total. And now I was wondering, as far as, is that representative, as far as a percentage of the schools that were going to be, like what percentage is that, I guess, of the parent guardian populace? It seems like such a small number. And I know that that's not a fault of anyone. I'm just wondering why more people maybe didn't come out or didn't participate. And if that's not a question for now, I understand that.
So I think you asked me for a percentage, so
If you have it.
I'll have to come back and respond on that. Certainly, while a number of engagement opportunities were provided, I think everyone in this room would like to see additional engagement.
Okay.
Again, the meetings that were well attended were those that took place in a school that maybe was located in or adjacent in a neighborhood that was part of the initial set of recommendations.
Okay.
So we saw more participation at those in-person events when we were in a school.
Which makes sense. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm just, like I said, I'm a parent, and I just, I want to be involved, so that's why.
Well, we're so happy that you're
Thank
here.
you.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions about the pre-process before we jump into the plan ahead?
Yeah, and thank you. I know this took place over the summer, but is there a reason why the parents and the students really in the district were not involved in some of the survey questions through any of the channels that the district has available to share with parents and students?
So I just want to clarify, the community forums and the survey that informed to the final recommendations, that was open from the beginning of May through the beginning of June. So for most of that time, we were still in session. Now, to your point, May is a very, very busy time in school life and for families. And so it may be interesting to get some feedback from the committee about the timing of future engagement.
Thank you. All right, so at this time, I would like to move into talking about strategies ahead. And I think that as we all have heard and discussed, there's a lot we did learn in this process, and a lot of good work was done. And so, any opportunity I can get to thank the task force members for their work, we thank them, and certainly this next iteration is a separate piece to this process. And so when we talk about, our stakeholder engagement, I think we all, can think about who that is, but I would like to hear from you all in terms of, who are we talking about engaging, and really who have we overlooked in this process? And so any thoughts or suggestions you may have to myself or any of our members of the team here as we start to think about who are those key stakeholders? And we often, we often think about our parents and our students, but wanting to be intentional to really name, who are we trying to engage with? And so does anybody have any initial thoughts or recommendations as we are, in this process of identifying that?
Well, one of the groups I thought about were churches. Some of the churches have really large youth groups, which of course have parents. And I didn't know if we could, hit some of the big churches like First Church, New Birth, Rema. I think that's right. Yeah, Rema. They're huge. They're huge. And if we had I don't know, town halls or some sort of event where, I don't know, the parents and the kids come out, I don't know, maybe just the parents, that the churches would pretty much back that. I know they would. They're strongly committed to our schools, but they need they need to know more. Like I didn't know that some of the things that children are offered are not offered in smaller schools, because I'll tell you, parents think that it's good to have their kid in a smaller school because then the teacher-student ratio is smaller. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily true either, but that's the thought. So they're thinking, oh my God, you're going to consolidate my child into a larger school, and then instead of it being a 1 to 18, 1 to 24, it's going to be a 1 to 32. So, and that, again, may not be true. So I think churches are a good way of letting people feel comfortable enough to ask those questions. I don't know, maybe because God is on there, I don't know. But whatever the case may be, I noticed that we didn't hit churches that much.
Thank you for highlighting that. Do you have any, like, in terms of churches and in terms of, because there's such a large, massive faith-based community, and there's so many different faith-based communities as well. Any thought or suggestions as to how we could authentically engage with our faith partners and being able to have at least a level-setting conversation initially, and planning ultimately to be able to engage with their families and youth. Any thoughts around that?
Well, some have alliances. Were you going to say that? Yeah. I believe the Baptists have an alliance. I know the Methodists do. And maybe instead of hitting every church, if we could go to the alliance that is several churches, and they'll promote the event and have more than one church come. So,
Thank you for that. Anybody else have anything around the stakeholder piece? Mr. Kennedy?
Yeah, I don't know what exactly community leaders are, but certainly youth-serving organizations, nonprofits that provide services and supports, wraparound services to students, to schools, that should and could be engaged in different kind of collective impact spaces that I believe can share some insight that will be beneficial.
Yes. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I actually agree with that too. You know, when you go into some of these schools, there's a lot of organizations that show up in the schools as well. So, you know, they're already working with the youth, and sometimes they follow the youth because sometimes the youth go to different schools, even in the same school year. So just connecting with those, you know, those programs and either having the programs do the event to help, you know, spread the word or whatever the case is, I think would be beneficial because they already have the student. And when they have the student, they also have the parents, the family, so.
Right. And I think during the pandemic, when the district did the LECs, I think that was a great representation of how nonprofits and community partners can provide additional support and insight to support and have the ears of the families. Because a lot of times they kind of trust those organizations, sometimes more so than the schools, right? And so that's definitely an opportunity to tap into.
Thank you for highlighting that. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's great. Any other ideas or suggestions around the stakeholder piece of this? Go. It's okay.
And I know that when you provide food, it really makes a difference because a lot of these, sometimes meetings are held at the time when kids are having dinner. And so if it's something that I can do, you know, I have to plan on dinner. I have to plan on getting my child in bed in time. I have to plan on waking them up early. So when you include something like that, like an incentive, it does kind of help bring people out. So that's all.
You're right.
Yes, thank you for highlighting that. In terms of communication channels, Dr. Moser really kind of highlighted some of the avenues that we used in terms of trying to collect data and having a community conversation. So wanting to really kind of get your thoughts around, and I know, I guess from what I understood, the report back was the most effective way we found in this first iteration was any meetings we had at school buildings seemed to provide the largest representation or activity. What would you say, you know, I guess wanting to hear from you all as members, what do you find is the best way to help organize people? We know obviously going into the community is priority, but really wanting to get your thoughts. I know you've already alluded to like church and some of the community nonprofit bases, but is there anything additional that you think might be more effective in this space than others?
I mean, definitely utilize, which I think you have a little bit for the social media aspect of engagement. Everybody has a phone, it seems like nowadays, so matter of fact, this is probably live right now, so.
Yes, we are.
So having, you know, ways that you can create some type of community virtually and having, comments and things like that, and just that social engagement online is definitely big as well. Not only just in person, because like I said, everybody has a phone. So when you can tap to them where they're currently at, they don't have to leave what they're doing, they can still get the information.
It's very helpful. And when you think about social media, I know we all use social media differently. And so is that a video? Is that a post? Is that, a certain frequency of posts and information? I mean, just any recommendations you may have around, because social media now it's so massive, and I think we're still trying to catch up in certain ways. But any thoughts, you may have around, like, what would you define as an additional lens that we should be thinking about when it comes to social media?
I think representation on social media is good. So not only hearing from the school staff or, the board, but also hearing from the parents also would be beneficial, I believe. And then, public announcements. I think I've seen a couple public announcements on social media from the district. Pretty much a campaign, centered around, everything that's going on. I think people follow a movement. So if there's something that, is engaging and ignites change, I think they will follow through on it.
Thank you. Anything you would add to that?
I'm an advocate of youth voice, so anytime young people can express and educate in that same way around issues that impact them, I think it's a great opportunity to share that information, particularly if we're talking about social media.
Yeah, absolutely. Very helpful.
Yeah, because I think, I don't know how many schools have like a youth council or things like that, that they can be involved in that process as well.
Yeah, it's a good question.
And if I could add one more thing. Just in terms of channels and getting information out, I go to a lot of high school and even middle school games and sporting events, and it's a ton of parents. It's a ton of community members there. So just having some type of presence where if it is a QR code or is a table or something where the information around what's happening in the schools or in the district can be distributed and disseminated, I think that's a missed opportunity.
I agree. Thank you for that.
I agree with him because, I pretty much go to all the open houses in my district, and there are tons of parents that walk through there and, they stop at my table and I'm looking for the board table, where they can pick up information. So, yeah, any place that parents congregate, and you're right, sports is perfect, but they always generally do come to open houses and parent-teacher conferences. So let's have the information there for them to pick up and to look at.
Very helpful. Would you say that there's a least effective way, like anything you've seen us do that you don't feel is in fact effective? I mean, we're not trying to throw shade or anything
I know,
like that.
all the robocalls.
This is all in love and light. Okay, you don't like the robocalls, okay.
Yeah, I agree.
No robocalls. Okay. All right, very helpful. So in terms, and I think you've mentioned it, I think it was Mr. Jenkins that mentioned a campaign essentially, or so thinking about the clarity, and even Miss Barnes, you mentioned like even hearing some things tonight that you hadn't heard before, and so I think that's really important to sit with and to really think about what information. Obviously this is multidimensional. This is a massive process, and recognizing that it is a lot of information. And so when we think about the information what information do you believe is critical for the community to know? And obviously thinking about, and we don't have to have this all figured out tonight, these are things just of food for thought, but kind of the cadence or the pace as to how we provide this information so that it doesn't become overwhelming or too much. And so just thinking through, like, if we could start this off in phases, what is that initial information do you feel is critical for our families and our community to know about this process?
I know that academic offerings is still, that's a concern if you were a parent. Is my child getting all the opportunities they can get in their school? Or is the school too small for that? Is there not enough staff for that? I don't think we've told folks that that's a really critical point as to why we're doing this whole thing. We're not just closing schools to close them, we're closing to give the kids more opportunities. And I don't know if that's getting through.
I echo that 100%. That was never part of the why that I've seen around school closures or heard around the school closures. And that's
critical.
Yeah, I think that's an area that some emphasis should be placed on. Just the quality of education and the level of access. It feels like we're taking away access, but it can be you increasing access to education and closing some of the buildings, right? I don't know if that's been messaged.
Thank you. Anything else you would add to that? I couldn't agree more. I feel like that's definitely something for us to think about. Is there anything else you would kind of identify or have kind of identified as you've watched this process kind of play out independently and then obviously with some additional context this evening? Is there any other critical information that you feel is really just critically important for us as a district to be communicating and conveying to our students and families specifically about this process?
One other thing that concerns me is that I didn't know that these buildings were as old as they are. And I think if parents were allowed to go and visit the schools that they may be assigned to, and they walk in and say, oh, this is this is slightly better than where my child currently is. I think it's just a matter of them not really understanding why we're doing this. Johnson Park was once on the list, and I love Johnson Park, but I walk in there sometimes, I'm a little depressed because my kids went to Johnson Park, and I ain't gonna tell you how old I am. So, but what school would they go to if they weren't at Johnson Park? Maybe if I were a parent, I'd like to go visit that school.
Yeah, and in doing so, and not that it's already in motion, like it's already happening.
Yeah.
Right? So it's still open for discussion, and not this is just a formality or performative, but we've already made a decision.
So, go look.
Very helpful. Anything to add to that? Lee, your face is lighting up over there. Oh.
There she is.
Yeah. I don't really know much about what's going on. I'm just an Ohio State student visiting for a class. My name is Katie Hollington. I'm excited to be here. You guys are doing awesome stuff. I was just curious about the input you guys have gotten from the communities. Have you been able to implement any of that, or is it so black and white that you can't do both, if that makes sense?
Great question. Lee, if you want to talk about, or Dr. Moser, what we've collected and essentially how that will play a part.
I'll take a swing, and then Ms. Cole can add more. So the task force had an initial set of recommendations, and after community feedback, actually came back and in their final recommendations did not include all of the schools that were in the initial set.
As in not closing all of the schools? Is that what you mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
Correct. That the initial set of recommendations was based on some data sources, but after the community input, the task force actually did not carry forward all of their initial recommendations.
Yeah, so each part of informing the process adds another layer, and that information then is presented to the board. Then the board then goes and adds other layers to really narrow down using the data, demographic data, programming data, looking at school funding data, bringing all of these different pieces together to make the best informed decision to strengthen Columbus City Schools and to provide the best academic offering, and also having something that is another asset to the community as well. So each piece of community engagement layers to narrow down to whatever that final recommendation is going to be.
And have you guys like gotten much input from like teachers? Like, what do they think about the change? Like, would they have a job in the other schools if their school is closing, and like, how do they feel about that aspect of it?
So at this point, these are recommendations. So there's no decision that has been made. So that question can't be answered at this time because everything is just informing, and we're still in the informing and gathering information stage.
I will just add one comment there, that the students, even if schools are consolidated, will need teachers. And so in most cases, if you look across other districts that have come through this work and previously in our district, just keep in mind that the students will need teachers in their new school as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And so when we think about, and we heard a couple of suggestions, especially like the offering of dinner, for example, but when we think about strategies that we can use to encourage community participation, right? We want to make sure that we are having authentic opportunities, whether it's going to the football games or it's having, you know, something at an open house or a PTA meeting. We're able to provide dinner. It's important for us to not just host something and, you know, the same 10 people show up. We want to make sure that we are meeting families where they're at, understanding that there are job schedules, there's language, you know, needs. So there's a lot of different variables that, you know, we are constantly thinking about in terms of engagement. And so any additional thoughts you may have around strategies that we can hopefully help to increase participation, because what we want to see happen, we want to, as I think somebody asked earlier about that 4,000, you know, this is a district of 47,000 students. And so recognizing we're grateful for the 4, you know, but how do we increase that? And how are we ensuring that anybody who wants to have an opportunity to be heard, students, staff, you know, different community partner, that they have the opportunity to do so. So just any thoughts, if you could have ever done this yourself and you would have said, if CCS would have did this, this would have, you know, produced more opportunity for engagement. And you can think about that too. I know that's a golden question.
I'll go back to the
Right.
community partners, right?
Right.
In the after-school space or out of
Yeah.
school time space, parents have to pick up their kids after school somewhere at some program, or dropping them off at a before-school type of program. Finding ways to collaborate and connect with those community partners that, again, they service the families in a different way, but they attend their events, right? Community partner types of events, family engagement events with the nonprofits and community partners. That's another opportunity to kind of partner and get their voice part of the process.
Yes. Thank you. Anything you would like to add? And how do you envision it? Is this like we call in all the nonprofit leaders in a room? Like just thought, like how would you do something like that?
Well, there are already convenings where all nonprofit leaders
Yeah,
are meeting, right?
right.
So it's just aligning to those collective, again, that collective impact space where the community partners, we share,
Right.
and I say we, being biased, my role.
Right.
That we share practices, we share different ideas and strategies, and so collectively getting that group on board, and we can kind of cascade that to our different organizations to create opportunities for families and for the district to come in and get that information.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hi.
Hi, sorry, Amina again.
No, you're fine.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Mr. Jenkins had said. I think social media is kind of like an untapped market. And I know that when we enroll our student, we give our phone number. And I don't know if the district has considered like text blasts. I know that works a lot of times. You can have an automated, they're like robo-dialers, and they just send out texts en masse. And you can do that, and you can keep people engaged that way. The student can get the text, and the parent can get the text. So, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's good.
Anything we want to add around just our engagement strategies? Anything pressing or the top of mind?
It's probably very random, but it might work. Well, let me ask this question. Does the district currently have any partnerships with like the sports realm, like the Blue Jackets, the Crew, all that?
Oh, yes.
So with those partnerships, I know they work with the district to do different things. Do they go there for anything?
To those facilities, like their places? Yeah, for different events. I know Lee would know more about that. Yeah.
Good, more of what your question.
Yeah, so the statement outside of the questions is maybe host those type of things at their facilities where the community for, the parents and everybody comes out, not only for a game, like it's easy to watch a game, but I'm saying to actually interact. So it's more of an interaction with, the team, and also they're getting information about what's going on with the district as well.
Yeah.
So it's more of like, oh, I'm bringing my child or my children to this event. Also, I'm getting information as well. So not only is this a memory, but now it's an informative memory, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it really helps if that athlete actually went through Columbus City Schools. And I know that we have athletes here in the city that have attended this school system.
Absolutely. I love that. Any other thoughts around just engagement strategies? And this is the beginning of a conversation, so I'm sure we will have more dialogue, and certainly just wanted to kind of have some top-of-the-mind conversation. And we recognize that topics like this are sensitive for many families, recognizing that it affects families differently. And so we want to be mindful as to how we are going about having this engagement, having these conversations. I know during the initial process, I got a lot of calls and a lot of emails, families who were very concerned about how this was going to affect, their child, whether it be special education or, English language learners. And so just even thinking about, how highly sensitive this is. And so any thoughts you may have, I know we talked a lot about just some specific strategies, but anything that we should be mindful of as we are obviously talking to families about very, hard things, especially if you are in a community and this is your community, and suddenly these recommendations may force you to be on a completely separate side of town. We recognize that is a challenge. And so one of the things that I wanted to be mindful of is just like the mental health space around this, like how are we socially, emotionally supporting our families, not just with the facts and, the information around academics and facilities, but just sometimes even that cultural understanding as to, we are going to have to do this, and this is what's there's a lot of moving pieces to that. So anything that you've heard or anything that we should be thinking about as we are also considering that space as well.
That has been a concern in certain schools that I've been in that have large populations of ESL students or those with that are differently abled. They're wondering, right now we're in a school where there's a bunch of us, so we're getting all these services, but if we go to another school and we get divided out, will those services decrease? And I don't have an answer for them on that, because I don't know how we're going to handle special needs students.
That's a great question. So being able to really speak to, and I know a lot of this will take time in terms of the planning process, which is something that we also had questions around. And so to your point, it's just like, how are we able to have some of those hard conversations when we still don't quite have the actual, like, what this will look like?
Can some of those questions be added to like the Panorama Family Survey that goes out? Like, just even some of those social emotional questions, right? Around what does this mean, or what type of barriers would this create, or what, levels of access? Can that be just added to things that are, or I guess at least I just know the Panorama surveys. Can it be added to that? Right.
Yeah.
In terms of getting their feedback that way?
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, we can always suggest it to our superintendent and team to certainly evaluate.
Because I think oftentimes it's what we think
Right.
the barriers may be, or what we think will cause, but I don't know if we're asking
Right.
the parents that, or even the students that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I have a question. So, is there anything structured around preserving schools' history? I say that because, like, for instance, I work with a school, and I work with a student. The parent also went to the school, and that parent's parent used to go to that school.
Right.
So it's more than just, I'm thinking about my current child. I'm thinking about I had history here too.
Yeah.
And if something ends, sometimes we tie our emotions to, our life and our history of what we've done.
Right.
So if they accomplish something at the school and there's no strategy to preserve accomplishments of the school, then it's going to feel as if nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
So I think that's another concern that I've seen. How do you preserve the
history
of it?
I really appreciate you asking that because as an alumni, I graduated from Brookhaven, and now that school is no longer here, but the history of that school is very much felt in this community. And to know that our trophies are in the basement of International is certainly not something that, it shouldn't be that way. And so that is something that my colleagues and I have talked about in terms of how do we properly honor, the schools and the history of these buildings. Because to your point, there is roots in this community, and we are not interested in just sweeping away the roots of our district. And so I appreciate you highlighting that because that has been a question and a conversation that we still need to navigate and figure out. So the board is open to suggestions on how we do that. There's been talk of a few different ideas. I won't throw it out there because then it'll suddenly be like, well, you said, and I was like, whoa. So, but I hear you, and I appreciate that, and certainly it's something that has been top of mind for sure.
And even, are we giving suggestions to that?
I'm writing everything down.
Even if it's something, so how like athletes and professional athletes, they have a Hall of Fame place, right? So if the district had a Hall of Fame place, almost like where people not only for one school, but the district.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the schools, you see, the achievements of the district, not just a particular school, but you can go in there, you can see the history of this, and it's like streamlined.
Right.
Yep, trophies, all that stuff. And it's almost like now, not only will it show what the district produced, but it also, like, as a school, I'm like, hey, I want us to be in that building too.
I want to be in there.
Right?
Yeah.
That's just a suggestion.
That's a good one.
I really appreciate you highlighting that. And a Hall of Fame, it didn't come off across that fancy, but a Hall of Fame definitely is something that has been kind of talked about, like what could that look like? So yeah, I really appreciate you highlighting that. Anything else around that particular, any other suggestions or ideas? And as we're kind of leading to our final question for tonight, but certainly not the final question for this process, we want to think about some benchmarks. And so hearing a little bit about the timeline and the process that was taken in terms of like the task force process, something we want to also think about in terms of, what are some of the benchmarks, ideally kind of any thoughts or suggestions you may have around a time frame as to, recognizing that we do have to make some decisions as a district, as a community, but certainly wanting to give time and opportunity to have this dialogue and have this engagement. But any thoughts you might have around, like, how do we really benchmark this and quantify the process, or even a time frame, just any thoughts you might have around that?
That's a hard question.
I know. I get asked this question every day, so I figure you might be able to answer it.
I think it's harder because everything's still working itself out to be solidified. I do think that how often does information get put out to the community just to update them?
Every Friday, the superintendent releases a report that has a series of different updates. So I know that does come out formally every Friday.
Okay.
And then obviously maybe our communications director can speak a little bit to any other, is there just a systematic, I know we have the superintendent's report that comes out every Friday, but in terms of our comms strategy.
Good evening. So we do have a couple of communications channels that are consistent. One is our Family Connector newsletter that goes out. We also have the Core Report newsletter that also goes out. They're on alternating Fridays.
Okay.
So that is something you, President Vera, well, Co-Chair Vera, also mentioned. The superintendent's report does go out every Friday. And of course, we also have our social media channels. But as far as consistency in distribution, those are our three main channels.
Thank you.
Is it effective in terms of getting information out or response to?
I believe that it is. We get a lot of feedback where people are telling us that they, received information from those newsletter channels. I guess Dr. Chapman would have to speak about her particular distribution that goes out on Fridays, but we definitely get a lot of feedback regarding those newsletters.
Yeah. And the board just implemented a newsletter as well that's new this year. So every Wednesday, typically every Wednesday after a board meeting, we also send out a board newsletter that just highlights legislation, highlights committee work. So that's a new avenue, something we just started this year, but just trying to be more intentional about providing information as to what's happening in the board meetings for those who don't have, 5 to 6 hours to, Zoom into our meetings. In addition to committee report outs, that's also something new that we are doing this year. So every second board meeting of the month, committee chairs are also reporting out as to what's happening in their committees so that the community and my colleagues can also get an up-to-date as to just what's happening within the work, any benchmarks, any information. And so those are just some additional things that specifically to the board, what we've also been trying to assist in the communications process. Whether it's effective or not, that's still to be determined, if I can be honest, but it is something that we are trying.
I also neglected to mention our Partnership Matters newsletter that comes from our engagement office to our community and to our partners. So that is another outlet as well.
And I guess my follow-up question, is that solely to CCS parents?
No.
Or in students and partners, or is that to the community writ large? Like, or is it an opportunity for it to go out to?
Sure, the Partnership Matters goes out to the entire community.
Okay.
And how do people go about registering? Is that like a sign-up thing, or how do families get on that distribution list?
Mrs. Cole, can you give some additional insight?
You have to get the, once you get it, the newsletter, you can, oh, I'm sorry. You click the subscribe button at the bottom of the newsletter.
Okay. All right.
And I think all of our communications vehicles at the bottom, if you forward it, you just click and you can sign up.
Okay. Thank you.
I think your partnership newsletter is excellent because, you know, that's where a lot of the nonprofits are signing up. That's where my community signed up. We were like, oh, we can be partners. We didn't know that, okay? And so I don't think you should stop that because we represent parents.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you may not think you're getting to the parents directly, but you're getting to the parents through what they get involved in.
Correct.
And so the partnership plan is a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I agree with that. But maybe in the social media posts, that can just highlight, this is how you subscribe, or just kind of emphasize or put highlight, this is how you could subscribe to know what's going on with this process, or just CCS in general.
That's a good call out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Anything else before? I know this, like I said, this is not the be-all, this is the beginning. And I really just appreciate all of the insight and perspective that you have provided tonight. We will be getting a scribe of this, and so we can just start to kind of collect our thoughts. And this information, you know, Chair Cole and I will be able to share with our colleagues as we are, you know, in the process of evaluating the strategy for this work, but understanding that we will continue to come back to this committee for just insight and perspective, and also thinking about, you know, what parts of the work do you want to be able to contribute to it as well. So I think it's important to think about, you know, your input is greatly appreciated, but understanding, as we've kind of highlighted tonight, this is a massive process. And so, you know, wanting to give you or asking you just to, you know, in what way do you feel like you could be able to help bridge some of the gaps and some of the suggestions you've provided tonight? If there are pieces of this that you're like, listen, I can help with the, you know, getting the nonprofits together, or is it, you know, the faith community, recognizing that we as a board can't do this by ourselves. And so we want to be able to build authentic partnerships with you as committee members to be able to carry out what these next steps look like. So I won't ask you to commit to that tonight, but certainly I want to be intentional in saying that this is a task for all of us, you know, and so it's certainly something that we're committed to, and, you know, we want to be able to do it alongside of each of you. So any final thoughts on this particular topic before we transition?
I get another question I always get is like, okay, when are they going to take the vote? When are they going to make the decision? People are strange beings. It's like right now I'm planning the wedding for my son. We planned for a year, but now it's crunch time, right? So everybody's in there. Everybody's in the mix now. And sometimes people wait until they realize that, oh my gosh, you know, they're going to make a decision soon. I better find out information. Right now they feel like they're cruising. You know, they've got all kinds of time. They're going to discuss this forever. But is there a time frame for when, at some point, we got to say it's going to happen? Has that been discussed at all?
Yeah, that's not something that has been, you know, clearly set in stone with my colleagues and I. For us, it's important to ensure that the process is followed, being able to have conversations with you as a committee. As I mentioned, 3 other committees are also working on pieces of this. But this is not something that we're trying to do forever. This is not just something that, you know, we're pretending to care about and want to plan. Like, for us, this is time sensitive, which is why this was brought to you this early in the committee process. All of my colleagues right now are also bringing this to their committee. So this is something that has actively been working on since the day we got the final recommendations. And so now it's a matter of bringing all of our pieces to the table to figure out what is the next step. So recognizing that it's time sensitive, but also recognizing we are not in a rush just to do something. We are committed to getting it right, and making sure that we did every possible thing. So when we make that vote and we make these decisions, we base it off of the right information, ensuring that every family member who wanted to be a part of the process had an opportunity to be a part of the process, and that we were able to look at multiple additional lenses before making that final recommendation or approving. So I don't have a definitive answer for you tonight, but
That's all right.
yes. All right. Well, with that being said, thank you for this really, I mean, it was only a few of us, but I feel like we got about 5 different strategies going here. So I really appreciate, even from our guests tonight, thank you. And as I mentioned, this is the beginning, and so certainly in the information provided tonight, we will be scribing and will be a part of a strategy that we are putting together. So thank you to the members of this committee for this really robust conversation. Before we adjourn, I did want to hand over, we do have our Government Affairs Director with us tonight, Beth Hess, who will be providing some information. As you know, this is Community Engagement and Advocacy Committee, so there is some work to come around our legislative platform, and so we just wanted to be able to give you kind of a what's to come around that. So, Director Hess.
Great, thank you, President Vera. So we are not going to discuss the legislative platform this evening. I'm going to let you go home and process all that you need to process about the task force, which is a huge lift and really the main focus of this committee right now. But the secondary piece that we have been talking about is a legislative platform. So we talked last month of kind of an overview of how government affairs and engagement are interacting right in this space. And so what will come to you, I'm going to hand you a hard copy tonight so you can have this and take a look at this draft. I can also email it to you if you need an electronic copy. But this is a draft of our legislative platform. It's very short. You're going to see it's a front and back. It's not a long document. But so what I'd like you to do is review this over the next month, because when we come back together in October, we can have a lengthy discussion. We can wordsmith, we can pull it apart, we can talk broad issues that might be missing from this platform and determine if they should be included or not. And so that's when we're going to have that broader discussion. But I just wanted to let you all know that's where we're headed. So we want to come to the meeting in October ready and prepared with our advocacy hats on to have that discussion. Although I can't promise you that you won't also be having a deep discussion about the task force, because like I said, that's really the #1 priority of this committee right now. So probably expect both. But the hope will be to be able to make a recommendation to the board regarding this platform at next month's meeting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any questions for Director Hess before we move forward, or any final thoughts? I don't know if Dr. Moser or Ms. Cole, anything?
Looking forward to it.
Good. All right, no other questions, no final thoughts? All right, well, all I need is a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn? Or you guys want to stay here all night? I'm cool, either way. It's up to you all.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Who's the second?
Mr. Jenkins.
Oh, call the roll. Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. Vera?
Yes. We are adjourned. All right, well, thank you all and have a great evening. We are adjourned.
All right.